Thanks for joining us. My name is Sean Johnson Andrews. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm your host for this episode of Breaking Culture Live. I'm the immediate past president of the Cultural Studies Association, and I'm broadcasting to you from the north side of Chicago. As always, thank you for joining us for this experiment in scholarly communication, where we chat with activists and academics, breaking down the breaking news. Today, I'm joined by Asher McMaher to speak about the state of trans rights and trans care in the U.S. today and the important work that they and their group Trans Upfront Illinois are doing in the state of Illinois and nationwide. Asher McMaher, pronouns they, them, theirs, is the executive director of Trans Upfront Illinois and is one of the few deaf and trans leaders in the country with over 10 years of advocacy experience supporting transgender and gender expansive youth, teen, and young adults, and advocating for disability justice. A passionate advocate with a background in legal research, Asher has been instrumental in shaping policies and initiatives that protect and empower transgender individuals. They've led multiple campaigns, including organizing the Trans Day of Visibility protest in Chicago, the rapid action response for the U.S. versus Skrmetti, which we'll speak about later, and was just a featured speaker at the Human Rights Conference in Washington, D.C. for World Pride. Asher is also a frequent speaker at conferences and workshops, sharing their expertise on transgender issues, legal protections, and community empowerment. So thanks so much for joining us today, Asher.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
I should say that I've been working with Trans Upfront on their policy and communication committees. And so I know Asher from that work. And I'm also really grateful for you for taking the time to speak with us today. For those of you who aren't following the news around anti trans attacks, every week of the past few years has brought what feels like an existential threat, or at least an explicitly cruel indignity for trans people. Literally thousands of anti trans bills are circulating in state houses. I guess you could call them straight houses. Um, and 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 the Supreme Court has shown no interest in protecting these instances of outright ignorance and bigotry from being adopted as law. Over the summer, their decision in the U.S. versus Skrmetti made it legal for states to restrict gender-affirming care for minors, and the aggressive maneuvers at the federal level have made it difficult for hospitals in states where this care is protected by law, like Illinois and Minnesota, to continue to provide it. So yesterday, I know this has been occupying a lot of your time over the last 24 or really the whole week. But yesterday, Lurie's Children's Hospital announced they would be pausing care for any patients who weren't already receiving it. This week, the same justices who delivered the ruling in Skrmetti are hearing arguments about whether it is legal to prevent trans kids, especially trans girls, from playing sports unless they pretend to be boys. But even this ruling has larger implications on the future of Title X protections or Title IX protections for all trans people. And I'm sure we'll talk about all of this in turn, as well as the work that Trans Upfront is doing. But first, I want to just welcome you, Asher, and ask, how are you doing? This is a lot to take.
Yeah, thank you again so much for having me. And I think, I have the privilege of having an incredible team at Trans Upfront, from our board of directors, our advisory boards, our numerous volunteers, who really help us uplift each other. And even in the face of these rollbacks that we've been seeing in our healthcare now for about a year, and all the other issues that we see, we still find time to celebrate the small things. And we make sure that we are managing each other's capacities and taking things 1 minute, 1 hour, and 1 day at a time, and handle one thing as it comes towards us, because we know that this is a marathon and not a sprint.
Yeah, I know you have the Trans Joy initiatives that you are feature on your as part of Trans Upfront. You had a field day in was this in
Yeah.
October? I forget what
Yeah,
month that was.
so we know that the political climate is heavy. We know that our kids have the world in their hands, on their cell phones. We know that our parents are worried about their youth and them being able to grow up to be the incredible adults they're meant to be. And so we founded what we call the Trans Joy Initiative, and it creates purposeful time that we just celebrate joy. You know, intergenerational, young to old, no matter your age, trans joy to come together. So we have a field day, we have a beach day, and we have an art event, really to bring people together and remind us that no matter what the government is trying to do, the federal government, that we have community, we have joy, and that can't be taken from us.
That's beautiful. Well, before we jump to current events, I wonder if you can give us a little bit of a background. Uh, like, what is your background as an activist, as a policy researcher, and what led you to start Trans Upfront Illinois?
Yeah, so for me, we can go all the way back to I'm a former kid in care, so I'm a former foster youth, and I knew going into college, one of the things I really wanted to do was to help others, and I have been through the system and really wanted to go down that mental health route. But I have been out as gay since 2001 and queer my whole life, and back then when you were a kid in care, if you were out and gay, you were considered at risk. There was all sorts of things that just wasn't supportive. And so I have worked in fundraising and development, so helping raise vital funds for organizations. And I've also worked as an advocate for hate crime victims, Title IX issues, and ultimately decided to go back to school again over COVID to get a certification and degree in legal research and studies to help behind the scenes of attorneys. I don't want to be an attorney. I don't want to
Sure.
litigate. No part of me wants to go in front of a judge. But I'm a huge nerd. I love reading. I love being able to deep dive into case precedent and other ideas to help uplift those that do that work, and provide the best support we can moving forward to utilize the legal system as slow and as painful as it is to support our youth.
And I want to talk more about that sort of policy work. When did and how long ago did you start? You were sort of instrumental in starting Trans Upfront. How long ago was that?
So Trans Upfront will turn 1 in March.
Okay, all right.
So we're no longer in our infancy. We're kind of more like going into toddlerhood. But the incredible thing about our organization is our board of directors is all made up of people who work within this role on their daily life. For instance, our director of education, Dr. Corey Lascano, is the LGBTQIA plus chair for the Chicago Teachers Union and is vital in, contract negotiations to protect our trans youth. And I'm running GSAs, and our director of policy works at AIDS Foundation doing policy work. So when we formed this organization, we did it with purpose, knowing as a volunteer organization and the world we're currently in, we wanted to make sure each person had these skills and ability behind the scenes in their day-to-day life, in their education, to be able to support us. This organization started in response to the rollback of Lurie Children's Hospital when they
Ah,
canceled surgeries. And we started as two trans people who happen to have a trans child. My partner and I are both trans. We actually have 5 children. Only one is trans, but we really wanted it to not be about us, but about our community. We are one community. It is not about any one family, but it's about everyone coming together to endure. And so from there, we started Trans Upfront, and we were instantly uplifted by other organizations. In our first week, we were endorsed by over 25 organizations. Now we have 74 organizational partners across the state.
wow. Well, I would say that's beyond toddlerhood. Then I think you really hit the ground running. Um, uh,
We did.
well, um, and we'll talk more about what that's meant in the last week. Um, but a lot of your work is also similar to that of a teacher. You spend a lot of time in schools, or at least working with young people, giving them resources to talk about gender more expansively. And in my experience as a parent with kids in public schools, I often find that teachers and other leaders don't always mean to be what we could call cis affirming, but they just don't have other language to talk about gender. So this seems like really important work to me. Can
Mhm.
you say more about that work and maybe how that fits in with the other work that Trans Upfront does?
Yeah, and the term we use is cisnormative. So
Cisnormative. Yeah.
yeah, and so cisnormative means the assumption that every person navigates the world like a cisgender individual, right? It's that same as like heteronormative. And we are so lucky to work in schools in so many ways. We go and talk to students, right? I've gone and sat in an auditorium with 200 high schoolers and talked about the history of advocacy and why it's important right now to stand up for your peers. I do trainings for teachers, administrators, everything from that Trans 101, correcting misinformation to case studies and how we can support providing them resources of navigating difficult dialogues, different ways to sort children without using gender, different terminology to address the class without using any gender. And then, of course, we also do family support, gender support plans. If there's any discrimination within the school, we provide completely free advocacy services to go in and help navigate those situations. We really are experts on the Illinois Human Rights Act. And to ensure that no matter where your child is in their education, they're able to go to school and just be a student, no matter who they are, and be affirmed in their identity.
No, that all sounds really important. Just sorting by gender in classrooms seems to be just endemic. You can't. It's hard to get around it.
It is, and it's again, it's that cisnormative, right? It's that, habit that we need to
Mhm.
break.
Yeah. Well, and it would seem like your services would be useful even for those serving on the highest court. In the last summer's Skrmetti ruling, in the sort of deciding opinion, the judges argued roughly that banning gender affirming care had nothing to do with gender. Um, I don't think you got any FaceTime with Justice Roberts, but you were part of a kind of rapid response to that ruling. So I don't know if you have comments about the ruling, but also what did this rapid response look like, and why is that kind of response important?
I'm very honored to be on the National Committee for SCOTUS responses, so the Supreme Court of the United States responses as it comes to trans issues. And last year we looked at US v. Skrmetti, which is a case out of Tennessee of a trans child being denied access to gender affirming care. Unfortunately, our justices ruled against us 6-3, stating that a state is not required to provide gender affirming care to a minor. And unfortunately, that set precedent across the United States for the rollbacks we are seeing to prevent or disallow gender affirming care to minors. We're seeing it here in the Midwest, we're seeing it all over. Um, Unfortunately or fortunately, I don't get FaceTime with the justices. I'm not sure what I would say to them. I am someone who likes to pride myself on having tact, but I feel like I'm probably not the right person to be face to face with them. Because I am a trans person and I have a young trans person in my home, and I want to be like, what are
Mhm.
you doing? Um, but unfortunately, we did see it coming, and we've seen it coming through all the SCOTUS responses. We saw it when it came to LGBT books, right? Where
Right.
the ruling was that schools were or parents were allowed to opt out of LGBT books for their
Right.
child. We're seeing in our current Supreme Court, our justices time and time again ruling against us as people, our history, our rights. Um, and unfortunately, we have another case due for decision in June. And during oral argument on the 13th, they made it pretty clear as they referenced Skrmetti that they were not on our side. Um,
Well, this is Little versus Hecox and West Virginia versus PBJ,
yes.
which is ostensibly over whether trans girls can play sports. But in our policy committee discussions, you've outlined how the stakes are actually over whether the Title IX protections apply to trans people, which has much bigger implications.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. So in this case, or cases, right, we have two cases of two young trans people in high school who just want to try out for track. They actually are both originally started in track. And funny enough, one of them didn't even make a team, right? But they were able to get an injunction and try out for their teams within their schools. And this has now been escalated all the way to the Supreme Court. And the legal issue is this a violation of the Equal Protection Clause? So should gender identity be considered part of the Equal Protection Clause? And is this a violation of Title IX? And Title IX has been in controversy since the beginning of the Trump administration. What is Title IX? Does it include gender identity? It does. It should. It does say it. it is a protected class, or is it just considered sex? So someone's biological sex. And so within this case, it would set precedent at a federal level if the Equal Protection Clause and Title IX both include gender identity. So there's so much more. And I think a lot of people don't realize when we go to the Supreme Court, and I keep saying, I wish these Supreme Court cases were labeled better. People see Hecox and they're like, what is that? Skrmetti, what
Right,
is that?
right.
I would love for it to be like trans healthcare case. Like, let's get a little tagline in there to get people
Sure,
involved. And so a lot of what we do up until then, and we just had an event last Tuesday about our arguments, is education.
sure,
Education is power, information is power. So even if, again, in June, when the decision comes out, if it doesn't go our way, we are going to be armed with information. We are going to be armed with community support. We're going to be armed with mental health support. We are going to make sure here in our community, as one community, that we are showing these kids, no matter who you are, we see you, you're valid, and you have the right to be who you are. And in Illinois, the Illinois High School Association already stated we stand with trans youth in sports. And it is ingrained into our Human Rights Act here under Section 3B2 for anything that has to do with gendered related activities.
sure. Well, and I guess the state of Illinois is now in a lawsuit with about 20 other states around this, because the federal government is trying to kind of impose their rationale on states that have these kinds of protections.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, we've signed on to quite a few lawsuits with other states as it pertains to trans issues over the past year.
um, so what you're talking about. This is what the rapid response kind of looks like: is educating people, kind of preparing the ground for what that ruling looks like it might be. Is that mostly the extent of what that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, and then all the way leading up to decision day. So, when you're looking at SCOTUS cases, we don't actually have like a date the decision's coming down. It can come down anytime in the month of June to the first week of July. Typically, with higher profile cases, they like to wait till the last minute. In Skrmetti, it was, I think, June 18th is when we finally got that. And we'll find out at about 10 in the morning, 9 in the morning. And then we go into our own version of rapid response, which is getting a press conference together typically within 5 hours and getting that out. And then we do a community response. So typically the responses come out during the week. As we get later in the month, it could be any day of the week, but it's typically Monday, Wednesday. And then um, from there, we sound the horns, right? We sound the
Sure.
community partners. We make sure people know what's going on. We get people to hit the streets. We had about 600 people in 48-hour notice shut down Michigan Avenue with us. And we believe strongly that since Chicago has so many protections, we are a very out and loud and queer and accepting community. It's our responsibility to show the rest of the country, even if US v. Skrmetti was for Tennessee, every child deserves access. Just because they're not in our state, we stand with everybody else. We want someone to look at the news, whether they're in Tennessee or Mississippi or Texas, and go, there are people out on the streets for my rights.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that we can hold our breath that this is going to turn out well, but it's good to know that there's ways for us all to get involved, regardless of how it turns out. Um, it seems like you do have more concrete, even more concrete efforts that you can deploy in response to this Lurie's Children's Hospital cutting care. There's yesterday, for those of you who aren't in Illinois or in Chicago, uh, yesterday, many parents and caregivers, and I guess this has been going on since last Thursday, but yesterday, Lurie finally released a press release saying that they were pausing or stopping all medical care for any patients that had not already begun it, which includes all hormone blockers and replacements. Um, it's one of the oldest hospitals to provide this care in the U.S., and it had already paused surgeries, like you said, I guess back in April, for kids under
February.
19.
Yeah,
February, okay.
yeah, last year.
Again, to comply with these sort of Trump administration policies. So this, I know that you've been very busy over the last week. What are you hearing from caregivers, and what do you and others at Trans Up Front do to help?
Yeah, so, Lurie Children's Hospital last week received notice from the Inspector General that they're under investigation alongside of 7 or 6 other hospitals across the country as it pertains to access to gender affirming care. In response to that, Lurie Children's Hospital decided to discontinue care for all patients who aren't currently accessing that care. And what that means is they haven't signed a consent to care. This is impacting families who have blockers, for instance. So if they haven't signed, they've been monitored for blockers, but actually haven't signed paperwork for blockers, they're being discharged or they're being told you need to go find somebody else. Um, we're seeing it across the board in a lot in HRT as well, but we are seeing a lot of it in that blockers because blockers they're going through that monitoring. Um,
Do you want to say anything about, for those who might not understand this process?
yeah,
Can you unpack just like for a minute what that
yeah,
looks like? For you're a parent, you have a kid who's kind of interested or thinking about their gender in an expansive way. You go to Lurie, and then what happens, and where do these different steps fit?
yeah. So, depending on the age of your child. So let's talk about a child who transitions very young. So your first transition is called your social transition, which just means changing your name, changing your pronouns, the way you dress, maybe your haircut, how you're presenting yourself to the world. If your child is prepubescent, meaning they haven't started puberty, they would be a candidate for hormone blockers. And what that means is that it would pause puberty, natural occurring puberty in that child's body. We have what we call Tanner levels, and those are different levels of puberty, no matter what your assigned sex at birth is, that indicate you're going to go into puberty. So Tanner level 2 is when we start implementing hormone blockers. And hormone blockers are not just used for trans children, they're used for cis children too. And what makes it even more alarming, like hospital systems like Lurie Children's or University of Chicago, who also rolled back, is they're still providing these puberty blockers to cis children, the exact same procedure, but not to trans children simply because of their gender identity. So a hormone blocker can be an implant in your arm. Think like the birth control for children. They put them under anesthesia, and simply it's because kids don't sit still. They're under for 5 to 7 minutes. It's a very quick procedure, and that implant covers 1 year of blocker. So it's pausing. It's literally just putting a pause on puberty. That's it. You can't have hormone blockers for any more than 2 years because it can cause brittle bone and other bone density issues. And then others opt for shots. So there's 3 months and 6 month shots, which we see more often when someone's starting to head towards HRT or hormone replacement therapy. Blockers are 100% reversible. Literally, all they're doing is putting up that dam between your hormones rushing in and starting puberty so that you can do that hormone replacement therapy if you decide at the time of puberty to have the puberty you want to go through as
Sure.
a trans person.
So it blocks the puberty that would make those irreversible changes, or changes that would be very difficult to reverse
Correct.
in the longer term.
Yeah,
So
there are so many aspects of puberty and naturally occurring puberty, meaning puberty aligned with your sex assigned at birth, that are not reversible. For instance, a trans child who is transitioning to female, if they wait too long, their voice will drop. Once your voice drops, there's therapies and things you can do, but your voice has dropped. You're never going to have the voice that you would have had if you could stop it beforehand. And that's one of the biggest things that we hear. Same thing with breast growth, or there's so many other things that are not reversible. And so having these blockers, having this stopgap, allows these children and their families time to make decisions. Does
yeah,
every child who get puberty blockers get HRT? No, right? It really depends. It's kid by kid. It's that family, it's their decision, and they should have the right to make those decisions for themselves and not the federal government making it for them. So as it pertains, to all the different stages of
sure.
transition, when we're talking about medical care, there's so much misinformation in the world right now about what we're doing to trans children. So many think that, oh, a child transitions at 5 and they're getting surgery. That is
Sure.
not true. Um, Once they reach the age, typically around 9, 10 is where we're seeing puberty blockers. And then HRC, you're seeing it, HRT,
Sure.
hormone replacement therapy. Um, we're seeing that more like 12, 13. That is the age in which the average child goes through puberty. When we're looking
Sure.
at surgical options, the youngest age a child can get top surgery is 16, so the removal of breast tissue, and they need a mental health provider as well as endocrinologists and other providers to state that their dysphoria is so pervasive that they're at risk of psychiatric distress or loss of life. So we're
Sure.
not saying every child when they turn 16, they're going in for surgery, right? We're saying that it is necessary to their life for this to happen.
And this, the difference between the top surgeries that a trans youth might get and versus a cisgender girl, we're talking about the difference between maybe a couple of hundred a year are getting top surgery, trans youth getting top surgery, as opposed to tens of thousands of cisgender girls being able to get breast enhancement or some other kind of what we would call top surgery, right?
And when it comes to top surgery enhancement, we don't typically see that until after the age of 18 because
Sure.
HRT causes in estrogen the growth of breasts and breast tissue. So when we're talking about trans males, is really what we're seeing it more often as. And it's
Yeah.
true. Do you know that more cisgender boys get breast reductions than transgender males by over double?
Wow.
Right. And so if we're providing, again, just like we talked about blockers, we're talking about this breast reduction or removal of breast tissue, we are seeing the same discriminatory nature. Why is it that a cisgender person, for a cosmetic reason, can get a breast reduction and a trans person can't as a life-saving measure?
And this was really what Skrmetti hinged on in a lot of
Mhm.
ways, right? It was this argument that if these procedures are allowed for cisgender people, and what these policies are trying to do is say no, it's only transgender people that can't get these.
Yes. Yeah. And that's as we're going into this new SCOTUS case is that equal protection clause, that Title IX, that, specialized protected group. Um, and when they were talking about the oral arguments last week, they were talking about only 1% of our population is trans. And they were saying, well, that's not enough people. Well, how many people do you need to
To
protect
have it,
them?
yeah, to have a protected class.
How many kids do we need to lose? I mean, we've had the highest loss of life last year for trans youth than we have in recorded history because of the rollbacks, because these kids are having such a hard time seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, to feel that someone cares about them, to feel that they can grow up to be who they're supposed to be. And the Supreme Court and our federal government is basically saying they would rather trans kids not be here than support them. And how is that protecting children?
Well, obviously it's not. And but you and trans up front, I mean, I guess the one of the silver linings right now is that you have been able to help a lot of the families affected just over the last day so far, to help get that care. And that's
Yes.
a place that maybe we can kind of like highlight that this is something, especially in the state of Illinois, but there are other organizations around the country, and you even mentioned one in the UK,
Mhm.
that can help kind of find a way to get this care, even if this hospital or that hospital has denied it or has decided to comply in advance with these Trump administration policies.
Yeah, and one thing to mention too is not a single hospital system in the United States has lost a dollar due to providing care. So all of this is pre-compliance. And while we all want to say we understand they're, cutting off the arm to save the body, that's Tom Shanley, CEO of Lurie's favorite statement. Or they have a
He
gun to
says this
their
out
head.
loud in meetings. In,
Yeah, he has. Or, our AG making comments of, well, the hospitals have a gun to their head. These are children. These are children. We're not, cutting off an arm to save the body. We are telling children that we don't feel that they need health care. And so at Trans Up Front, we formed the first gender affirming care navigation system. Um, and anyone who has a trans loved one, 25 and under, can utilize that service on our
Um,
website.
I'm gonna bring up the website if that's all
Yeah,
right.
absolutely. So it's www.transupfrontil.com/GAC, like gender affirming care. And our advocates are able to help find you a provider. And so as you fill out this form, so there we go,
So
there's our
yeah,
lovely website.
this is the website, and then if you go here to what is it? It's services and
Mhm.
gender affirming care navigation. This is where people can kind of request help
Yeah,
here.
absolutely. And you can request help for mental health, medical, surgical, any type of gender affirming service that you need. And so we have been able to help almost every person who has come to us. Right now, we have more limited resources as it pertains to bottom surgery, but that really is an 18 and up procedure. Um, but we have amazing partners and medical and mental health partners that we've been able to get people rescheduled within a week. We have immediate openings to help with mental health within our partnerships. Um, and then the same thing even with blockers. We work with providers that even take no federal funding, so you know that your care is not going to be pulled out from under you. We have hospital systems that we're directly referring to that's still holding strong. And we have been able to make sure anyone in our state or who comes into our state. So if you live in Wisconsin, Iowa, Indiana, Michigan, any of those surrounding states, and you're like, I'm going to cross state lines, my kid needs this care, we will still help you. Please reach out to us. We will get you scheduled with a provider. Everything that we do is confidential. We actually make sure to destroy all records after we make sure that you are taken care of. We want to make sure no one ever feels like they are too scared to ask for help. We're here and we're going to continue to be here. We're not going anywhere.
Well, and from the sound of it, you this is a 24-hour a day process for you too, or job for you. So thank
It
you for your
does
work.
sometimes feel that way. And you can ask my partner, will tell you that I take calls at 2 in the morning for crises. And it's an honor to be trusted to be able to do that work. And again, we have an incredible organization full of volunteers like yourself who help in all sorts of ways to continue taking things one step at a time to make our state and our family safer.
Um, well, this I know there's a variety of ways people can get involved, but are there a few things that if people want to help, if people want to kind of assist with the mission, what can people do either in Illinois, in Chicago, or kind of elsewhere?
Yeah, so the first one is donate. We are in what we say community funded organization. We support trans youth. We don't get any federal funding. We don't get any state funding. We can't even get a corporate sponsor. If you're a corporation out there listening, give us your money, please. Um, we are doing life-saving work for these kids. You can become a monthly donor for as little as $5 a month, one-time donor. You have in-kind things. You want to donate flags. I mean, there are so many ways that we could use your help. The next is becoming a volunteer. We have an open house on January 29th. If you go to our website, transupfrontil.com, on the front page, you'll see how to register. Um, and how to get involved. You don't need to have any background. You don't need to be trans. You just need to care. Ways to get involved. We have different committees from graphic design and art, grants, policy, helping with outreach, tabling. I mean, there's so many ways that we can use your help, and whether it's something you're passionate about, it's something that you are professional in, it's literally, I have an extra 2 hours a month, how can I help? We will find a way for you to help and get involved in this movement.
And I imagine there are parallel groups around the country that we could also use your help if you're going to be a volunteer too.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So my recommendation is reaching out, if you're in another state, reaching out to your local pride organization and simply saying, what can I do to support you? every organization is going to be a little bit different. If you're looking for something more at a national level, you can reach out to HRC. There are a lot of national organizations, even PFLAG is a national organization people don't realize that could
Mhm.
use your help. I mean, right now, what is really in dire need are those organizations that support youth.
Right.
Um, they're desperate. They're desperate for your time. They're desperate for your money. They're desperate to keep these kids going.
And Mackenzie Scott can only make so many donations.
You
So
know, she is a godsend. And she just donated $45 million to the Trevor Project. I keep saying,
yeah,
can she just give us 1/45th of that?
yeah,
Could you
exactly. Just a little
imagine
bit.
the lives we could change? But we really do rub pennies together at Trans Upfront to make things happen. And the impact we've been able to have has been incredible. And that is simply because of incredible volunteers and people who have worked alongside me and our team to ensure that no one's left behind. I mean, 99.999% of our organization is unpaid. We just got our first grants from Lady Gaga, the Born This Way Foundation,
Nice.
which was incredible. And we were able to hire our first paid employee who is helping us with fundraising and development and helping us use that money to create more funds to help more people. And they have been a godsend the last couple weeks since they started. And our goal is also to create more jobs for trans people, to support
Right.
trans people.
Well, thanks for all you're doing here in Illinois and nationwide, and thanks for spending some time with us today to tell us about what Trans Up Front is doing, and really what the state of trans rights and trans care is in the U.S.
Yeah, of course. I'm so happy to be here. And thank you for being a volunteer with us and for
You bet.
having me on. And if anyone has any questions or needs any support, no matter where you are in the country or in the world, please reach out to us. We will happily talk to you. Even if you're outside of our service area, we will help you find the right person and get you to where you need to go.
Great. Well, this episode is going to be available on the Breaking Culture Live YouTube channel. So share it with your colleagues, for people that you think might be interested in this information, and let us know if you have any ideas about future episodes or invitees by emailing us at breakingculturelive@gmail.com. Again, I'm Sean Johnson Andrews. Please check out my Substack at breakingculture.substack.com.